here tonight to celebrate this great anniversary of the Institute. And yes, to receive the Award of Leadership in the Americas. I'm honored by this recognition and receive it more as a testimony to the efforts that Mexican people have made in recent years to make our country a stronger, more prosperous, and free nation than as a personal award. I really want to congratulate the Institute of the Americas for its rich 30-year history. This is an organization that champions the ideals of freedom, democracy, rule of law, and in particular, the mutual understanding between countries in America, and in particular, the mutual understanding that is needed between Mexico and the United States. Congratulations to the Ambassador Ted Gildred, and congratulations to Dr. Richard Atkinson as well. I think they are two, not only American in the local sense of the word, but the real North American and real American persons that understand that we are living together in the same continent, and we need to understand much better each other. So your support, your visions, and your courage to make possible this great initiative is still today providing a lot of benefits for millions and millions of people in the continent. This has been a very exciting event, and probably long enough. And of course, for me, being former president, it's very exciting to share all the stories, tales, and experiences I had as president of Mexico. But let me pick one of them in order to share with you tonight. And that would be the economy. Reading the press at the end of last year and the beginning of this year, it did look like Mexico was having a very good economic momentum. The Economist published a special issue, special magazine, and the title was The Rise of Mexico, and Mexico was in the front page. Forbes talked about the Mexican miracle, and even Joseph Stiglitz said Mexico is more competitive than China. Obviously, it was too much to say that Mexico was going to surpass China. However, it is true that Mexico was once again a promising economy. And what is remarkable is that all these changes happen in the worst part of the economic crisis in the world. Not only that, during my tenure, Mexico faced very serious problems apart from this one. The increase in criminal violence, the outbreak of a lethal and unknown virus, the H1N1, or the worst drought in history, to mention some of them. So let me share with you my experience dealing with the worst economic crisis in living memory. As the members of the Institute of the Americans know very well, there is an expression that says, when the U.S. catches a cold, Mexico gets pneumonia. Indeed, when American imports fell following the financial crisis, our GDP began to contract at an annual rate of more than 10% during the first 2 quarters of 2009. So we had to act, and we had to act very, very quickly. And this is what we did. First, my government implemented all the available countercyclical measures in order to mitigate the impact of the crisis and of course, to save as many jobs as possible among the Mexican people. We needed to support the poorest families, and we increased conditional cash transfer, the very famous program of Oportunidades, in order to support the conditions of the poorest families and neutralize the impact of the recession on those families. And we established an exceptional temporary jobs program aimed at community works in the poorest areas in the country. So we were paying like 2 minimum salaries for people just cleaning up archaeological sites, for instance, or country roads, or preventing wood fires. And it was a job for 3 to 6 months in all those poorest communities in the country. That year, 2009, we increased substantially the budget for infrastructure, in particularly in public works. Additionally, the government provided guarantees to small and medium enterprises. So we went to the banking system and tell them, I know that it is very difficult for you to provide a loan for this small businessman or businesswoman, but I will guarantee at least 30%, 40% of the credit instead of his own patrimony. So during my administration, even in the middle of the crisis, we multiplied by 6 the amount of credit to SMEs in Mexico. And to protect the export-oriented jobs, we needed to be very creative. A lot of companies, global companies established in Mexico, announced to the government that they were going to fire hundreds of thousands of Mexican workers due to the recession. And we reached an agreement with companies and unions in that sector. And the deal was like this. If workers accepted a pay cut, and companies accepted pay workers a part of their salary instead of firing them, then the federal government paid the workers part of their salary as well for 3 to 6 months. And in that way, we were able to preserve almost 500,000 jobs in export-oriented industry, automotive industry, electronics, and others. And of course, yes, we had to increase the fiscal deficit in 2009. Actually, we expanded public expenditures by almost 3 points of GDP that year. But we knew, and this is very important, we knew that the fiscal deficit is a one-shot weapon. You can use it only once, and then you need to reload, which means you need to reduce the fiscal deficit again. That is crucial. Why? Because many governments made economic stimulus a permanent measure, and that was a mistake. And they rode into economic crisis still unsolved, and that is what is happening exactly in several countries in Europe. And then once we realized that the economy was bouncing back, according with the figures, we put in place an exit strategy in order to reduce the fiscal deficit again. To do that, we follow a very old recipe, which is increasing revenues, meaning taxes, and cutting spending. Of course, both of them very high political cost. But we realized what we needed to do so. Otherwise, Mexico could run a tremendous risk in financial markets. Now, seeing that moment, I'm very sure that if we didn't reduce the deficit at the end of 2009, going into 2010, Mexico could be one of those economies suffering a lot due to the structural adjustment like it's happening today in Spain and Portugal and Greece and several countries over there. And we needed to take very bold and difficult decisions. For instance, by closing a very big, loss-making, redundant, and very inefficient public utility, the light and power company, Luz y Fuerza, which provided electricity for Mexico City, metropolitan area, and the center of the country. We are talking about like 25 million consumers of that electricity at that time, and probably 44,000 workers. But the point is the company was completely useless because the cost for taxpayer was more than $5 billion a year over the payments of the customers in tariffs. Why? Because there was a very bad relationship, a very abusive one, between the company and the union. So the contract, the collective contract with the union was like this. For instance, the union opposed to the use of computers in the company. As long as the computers are threatening the jobs, you have any trouble with your electric bill, you need to go to the office of Luz y Fuerza, making a very long line, maybe 1 hour and a half. And once you get a counter, there was somebody asking for your problem. He or she was going to go to the back office there, looking for your own register of consumption, which it was written by pencil in a card. And maybe through some bribe can fix the problem. And then you need to make another line in order to open a new contract with the company. There was some clauses saying that the government, the owner of the company, needed to pay, for instance, if a group of workers cross one street and suddenly get into other sector, is like passing from San Diego to Coronado, the company needed to pay them hotel expenditures, meals, and laundry services, and so on. So we closed the company. And with that, we saved more than $5 billion a year in subsidies. And more than that, we increased competitiveness in Mexico City. Only 1 year after, the other company, CFE, was able to get 400,000 new contracts in electricity in that place. However, we did much more than just close the deficit at that year. We were in troubles already. We were paying a very high cost. So we decided to use that moment not only to overcome the economic crisis, but also to increase competitiveness in the country. And we put in place several measures in order to do so. First, through the implementation of structural reforms. For instance, pensions. For public servants, we went from the traditional system, which is very dangerous for any economy, including the American economy, by the way, even today. We passed from the traditional system of pay-as-you-go to a new one of individual retirement saving accounts. And only with this change, we save 30 points of GDP, 30 points of GDP at net present value to public finances by avoiding future entitlements to the government. Other reforms, tax reforms, in order to increase the non-oil revenues for the government. An energy reform in order to allow, by first time, private companies getting contracts, flexible contracts with Pemex. Let me tell you that I tried even more ambitious energy reform, and it was blocked in the Congress. But one way to say that is I was looking for a touchdown in that occasions, and what I got is only a 1st and 10, but it was enough for that time. Now it's more ambitious play is required. Finally, we changed the labor law in order to provide more flexibility to the labor market. Second, we bet on trade. We learned a lot from NAFTA, but Mexico has free trade agreements not only with Canada and the US, we have free trade agreements with 44 countries in the world. And with all those agreements, Mexican products have access, free access, to more than 1 billion consumers in the world. And beyond that, even with countries without free trade agreements, we reduce tariffs. I remember these beautiful meetings of the G20. I remember one in probably Toronto. And all those 20 leaders, the president of the US, the president of Russia, China, prime minister of India, the UK, all these great colleagues, all of us say, like a Santa Claus saying in the last communique, we support free trade and we reject protectionism. Nevertheless, frankly speaking, like a week after, 15 out of 20 of the leaders raised taxes and established more barriers to trade. We did the other way around. We reduced tariffs, for instance, for industry from 11% on average to 4% on average in the middle of the crisis. And I suffered a lot of pressure coming from business community in Mexico, some of them saying, no, we are going to suffer a lot, the invasion from foreign products. But the point is this, for a lot of plants, a lot of companies, being in Tijuana, for instance, it is crucial to get access to any kind of inputs, the best and cheapest inputs in the world. And that's the only way in which Mexico today is the first producer of flat screens in the world. And most of them are produced just right in the border. And it's one of the best countries producing equipment for medical services. Because we open our trade for inputs, more than 80% of the world trade is intermediate products. So Mexico became very competitive for this side. Third, we cut red tape in the government by eliminating almost half of our government regulations. We try to do everything. For instance, I remember that we organized, well, first I called my cabinet and say, it was like April, I say, by October, you need personally, I told to the secretaries, you need personally to explain me the regulations you need, the laws or the norms you need for your office. If you are not able to explain me one single law or regulation, we will erase it. And we did other things. For instance, we organized like a public context among the public around this very simple question. What could be the most useless procedure in federal government? What could be the most stupid rule? So we received like 3,000 proposals, something like that. We learned a lot. And by October 2010, we erased 16,000 procedures at federal level. Other was to support small and medium enterprises. For instance, according with the Mexican law, if you want to open a business, small business even, you need to go first to the Foreign Relations Secretary ask for a permit. Do you know why you need to go first to the Foreign Relations Secretary? No? Well, me neither, so I don't know what is the reason, but you need to go there. And then you need to go to the Treasury, and then you need to go to the Social Security Institute, and then you need to go to the Economy Secretary, and so on and on. There was a curious thing. The software of Secretaría de Hacienda, the Treasury, was unable to establish connection with the software of the Social Security Institute, which is absurd. So we erased all of that, and even with the same regulation, because some of them are related, the Congress need to pass several changes, we established one single procedure, and you can fulfill all the federal requirements in 2 hours in the office of one public corridor. So we deregulated the economy. Other point, fifth, as I already mentioned, we invested a lot in infrastructure. Yes, we increased the budget, but that was not the main or the most important measure in order to increase infrastructure. We opened the economy to public-private projects, and we created the infrastructure fund. How was that? By privatizing toll highways already in place. We sold, for instance, the highway between Mexico City and Guadalajara. And with that money, we were able to start the construction of other highways, for instance, the new highway between Durango and Mazatlan, just to tell about this single highway. It has more than 80 more than 80 tunnels, which means more tunnels in that highway in Mexico than the tunnels made in 25 years in the country. And more than 100 bridges. One of them, the Baluarte Bicentenario, which is the highest bridge in its type in the world. More than 400 meters between the bridge and the river, and with steel cables only. More than half a kilometer between one column and the other column. It's a beautiful bridge. Well, to give you an idea, we built or rebuilt more than 14,000 miles, 14,000 miles of highways, country roads, and so on. That is the distance between the North and the South Pole. Fifth, we invested even more in our people. We built 1,200 new hospitals or clinics in the country and rebuilt other 2,000 more. And through the Seguro Popular, the popular insurance, we were able to reach, at the end of the administration's, universal coverage, which means there is doctor, medicine, and treatment for any Mexican who needs it. Only to give you one detail of that. We took a very difficult decision in order to cover all the cancers for all the children under 18 years old. It was very expensive. But before that, 7 out of 10 children with leukemia died. And after this measure, 7 out of 10 children survived. That is the difference of this kind of powerful measure we take. 6, we also invested in education, reaching universal coverage at primary level, our elementary schools, and creating 1,100 new high schools and 140 new universities, all of them public and tuition-free universities and high schools. And that produced a collateral benefit, if I can say that, an externality, positive externality, because now there are more than 100,000 new engineers graduating in Mexico every single year. 100,000 engineers, which means more engineers than in Germany or the UK or Canada or Brazil. And all those kids or young people are providing a lot of competitiveness to the industry at the end. So when I finished my office, the Mexican economy was in relative good shape. For instance, the economy was growing almost 4.5% on average in the last 3.5 years. The rate of unemployment was below 5%, and the total debt was only 32% of GDP. Just to give you an idea, the ratio between debt and GDP here in the States is 85%, and the average in OECD countries is like 65%, something like that. The debt was the nightmare of Latin America and Mexico, of course, as the people of Institute of the Americas know very well. Today, the amount of dollars, the amount of foreign reserves at the central bank in Mexico are more than almost 3 times the total external debt of Mexico, to give you an idea, and that's providing a lot of stability to the country. Inflation, and interest rates are at their lowest level in history. And with an expansion of more than 16% of the economy in the last 3 years of my administrations, we were able to create almost 2 million jobs in the formal sector. And what happened with competitiveness? Some examples. When I took office, Mexico was the 9th largest exporter of vehicles in the world. Now is the 4th largest exporter of vehicles in the world. In this period, we surpassed Spain, the United Kingdom, the United States, and other countries. And probably Mexico could be fighting for being in the podium of the 3 largest exporters. Talking about manufactured products, Mexico is exporting more than 60% of the total manufactured products in the region, in Latin American and Caribbean region. That means that Mexican manufactured products exported are more than the rest of the exports of the Latin American and Caribbean countries combined, including Brazil. And finally, and a very important number for both of us, the net rate of immigration of Mexican workers to the United States went to 0 3 years in a row, 2010, 11, and 12. In other words, and according to the Pew Institute, the net migration flow from Mexico to the United States has stopped and may have reversed. Dear friends of the Institute of the Americas, I know very well that Mexico has huge challenges. But at the same time, a promising future could come true for Mexico as long as leaders take the right decisions that implies courage and vision. I serve my country in very difficult moments. However, I don't comply about that. On the contrary, I learned since I was a child that serving your country is a sublime way to love your neighbor. And to serve Mexico in such difficult moments has been for me a double honor and a singular privilege I will never be able to thank enough. I want to reiterate my congratulations to the Institute of the Americas, because the Institute has reached its goal, being puente de entendimiento, as the ambassador said, bridge of understanding between our people and countries. And long life to the Institute and the people serving the others through this great institution. Thank you very much for this award.
Perfect. I think you go to Washington.